Hello, welcome to week 12 lecture 58. You already know about endangered languages. Today we will talk about endangered language and how teaching can actually help in revitalizing the endangered languages. So when we talk about language teaching, there are various components to that. So what are the components, how do we create those, that's what we will discuss in today's class. Through teaching learning materials, we can teach words, sentences, phrases, text, and how the things are created so that one can learn their own language in formal or in informal learning situation, how these things are created. So will you tell about that, how we develop these things, what is language shift?
Yeah, so before we talk about creation of the materials, I think I'll mention certain things that I have already mentioned for them in the classes. So, how the formal classroom languages initiate language shift. So, when you learn about endangerment, so endangerment happens for certain reasons. So, there are some big languages which will kill the small languages, or I talked about language attrition, if you remember, which is the loss of first language. So, how this language attrition happens as the formal languages are imposed. And you remember the definition of dialect and language when I said that a language is a dialect with army and navy. So, it is also said that along with army and navy, schooling is another weapon. Why I am using the word weapon? Because through formal schooling many languages are killed. So, there are many languages which are spoken around us and limited number of languages are introduced through schools. So, when children go to school, they not only have to learn or conduct different teaching learning activities through the formal school language, but at times it is they are forced not to use their own home language. So, I am not using the term mother tongue because it is debatable, you know that. So, the home languages, the different minor languages which are spoken by the children at home domain, these are prohibited in classroom, which is also a kind of psychological violence for them. So, the formal school languages basically initiate the language shift, and that is very important for us to understand sociolinguistically. And along with that, as school is the space which is creating and initiating the language shift, we can say that the school space can be utilized to revitalize languages. You already know about language revitalization and you know about language shift. So, you can perfectly understand what we are trying to say. The space for language shift can be utilized as a space for language revitalization. That is what we are trying to say.
And you can also think about the languages which you may have heard your neighbors speak or maybe you speak, but those languages are not used in the school. Maybe they are not used because the speakers do not feel like using it in the public domain or in the formal context, or they are discouraged from using those languages. You can actually think about those languages. It is very easy to see if you look around for these type of languages. They are very common. This whole system is very common, that is what we want to tell.
Yes, yes, and if you remember the deficit hypothesis by Bernstein that you have learned as a part of language teaching classes. So, there are two set of codes like elaborated and restricted codes. So, if the children speak restricted code, which is a part of some language, so you can understand what happens, right. So, when we conduct field work on different languages and consider the educational aspects along with the language endangerment issues, there are a couple of things that we understand. So, I will give some example of the data that we collected from field on endangered languages or vulnerable languages, you can say, and see the role of schooling for language shift and role of schooling in language revitalization. So, Santali is a language which is a scheduled language now. It was not a scheduled language before 1990s. So, after making Santali as a scheduled language, there were initiatives of creation of teaching learning material in Santali. I am not saying that it is widely done, but still there are initiatives by the community members to create different teaching learning materials. As opposed to it, there is another Austroasiatic language called Koda, which is spoken in Austroasiatic belt, you can say, different areas of eastern India. It does not have any such teaching learning material or initiatives of creating teaching learning material. So, we can find a difference between these two community members. We can say that Santali is maintained widely because its presence is there in formal schooling domain, as opposed to Koda, which is absent in schooling domain. So, schooling can actually make a change in terms of language shift. So, this is something that we have to remember.
I think you can also remember about the example I gave while talking about language endangerment about these two particular communities, Santali and Koda. How now Koda members actually want to identify themselves as Santali, because more prestige has been added to Santali, because Santali is taught in many of the schools, teaching materials, learning materials are being created in this language. So, some of the speakers of Koda community, they want to use the surname of Santali people. They want to identify themselves as Santali people, not as Koda people. So, we see that how actually education can add more prestige to a language.
So, there is another point that I would like to mention. When we talked about the idea of standardization, we said that codification is a major part of standardization process. So, codification means basically creation of material like dictionary, grammar, and along with school books. So, the standardization utilizes codification in order to codify languages. When we talk about the smaller languages which are trying to fight in the battle of language conflict. So, at times there are initiatives, you can think about several examples which you may know, where they are trying to create teaching learning materials in maybe by informal initiatives, which can be considered as an initiative of the language revitalization initiative. So, it may not happen in the formal level, but maybe informally there are community members who try to create teaching learning materials. So, I already talked about the example of Santali and Koda. Let me also give an example of the Kurukh community. So, we are currently working on the Kurukh community members in northern part of Bengal and Kurukh community members in the northern part of Bangladesh, where they are sharing a border, and we are trying to understand if we can help the Kurukh children to revive their language through teaching learning materials. So, the team who is working with the community members, they have collected data from the older speakers. I tried to understand the pattern of language shift, and also collected words, sentences, narratives, and songs, riddles, traditional painting styles, etc. And there are initiatives of creation of teaching learning material and giving it to the community. So, we talked about giving back to the community. So, these materials will be given to the community so that they can informally use it at home to save their language. And we already talked about the example of Toto and Nepali. So, Nepali is engulfing Toto, which is very prominent in the isolated Toto speaking village, and the initiatives of some initiatives of creation of Toto teaching learning material by some individual efforts are also have also been done, which is basically another way to revitalize the language. So, there are these initiatives which can be cited at this moment.
And we have also seen there are certain informal schools like Sunday schools, where the community members gather together and they teach the things of formal education in their mother tongue. So, there we see that in many of the places where these minor communities or smaller communities, they have these Sunday schools, where the things which are taught in the regular schools are taught in their mother tongue in these Sunday schools. So, these things help the children to learn the concept in a better way because they are being taught in their own mother tongue, and at the same time also helps the language because the language is being used more. So, we see there are basic maths book or basic science books being written informally by the community members themselves, and then they are used to teach the younger people so that they can learn and the concepts can be clear to them. So, we also see the practice of these Sunday schools.
Yes.
So, that is what we witnessed during our field studies.
So, now I will tell you about my experience of working with 4 communities and creation of pedagogic materials in order to save their languages. So, and I will also talk about hybrid language again that I mentioned in classes. So, along with the languages of their own, the hybrid languages were also used, which is under threat by the big languages again. So, these 4 communities are the Kurmali speakers in Purulia, the Rajbongshi speakers in North Bengal, the Khortha speakers in Malda, and some varieties of Eastern Bengali in the North 24 Parganas. So, I did an experiment with the community children and also with the teachers. So, I will talk about the experiment and you can understand what kind of initiatives can be taken in order to revive languages from a pedagogical point of view, a language teaching point of view. So, initially my task was to collect data. You have already learnt about techniques of collecting data. So, the first task was to collect data. So, I have collected data with some questionnaires from the community members, all 4 community members, and before collecting the data I gathered some information, and with the data certain contrast points were established from the formal school language. So, for most of them the formal school language was Bangla, but in Purulia we found that for some children school language was Hindi, and in northern Bengal I did not work in Nepali area for this work, but in some areas Nepali is the formal school language. So, mostly I used Bangla as the contrast language and tried to see what are the conflict areas in terms of their structure. So, mostly I focused on morphosyntax. So, we found that there were some major contrast areas in verbs. So, for example, one language, the mother tongue of the children in Rajbongshi area, they have number agreement which is not there in Bangla. So, it means the verbs will change if the number changes with singular and plural. Bangla has person agreement, but Rajbongshi has both person and number agreement. So, children will have difficulties. So, let me tell you that this marking the conflict areas were basically done so that we can understand the difficulties for children. So, those particular structures can be difficult for children because the pattern is completely different. In Malda area for Khortha we found that there is gender agreement which is not there in Bangla, but it is there. So, with gender certain forms are changing. So, we mark the patterns of conflict in terms of the morphosyntax, and in North 24 Parganas we did not find much differences, but we found that there were some genitive terms which are very different from the formal school Bangla or standard Bangla. So, those are creating problems for children in comprehending the school language. So, these will be, and I did not mention about Kurmali. Kurmali has different varieties which are again having a very different kind of agreement pattern. So, after marking the conflict areas, there were some initiatives where teacher workshops were conducted with the teachers of all 4 zones. So, the teachers were together and some picture books were given to the teachers where they were asked to describe those pictures, the wordless picture books, describe the pictures in the children's language. So, it was found that some teachers do not know the children's language, some teachers belong to the same community, and some teachers have some idea, but not very clear. So, when the teachers actually wrote the stories, we also discussed about creation of teaching learning material with the picture book based stories. So, we had a very detailed discussion of what kind of teaching learning material can be produced, and in the workshops I demonstrated the analysis that I had conducted with the conflict points. So, it was very useful because teachers understood that their children are not lagging behind, but they do not understand certain things because their own language has a very different structure. So, this collaborative workshop also had some suggestions of teaching learning material that can be produced, and those teaching learning material suggestions were later compiled together in order to create a report. And the report for teaching learning material along with the collection of the stories were printed and circulated among the teachers. And it was very important for me to mention that I circulated all 4 languages to all 4 areas. So, it is important for them to understand that there are differences in other areas. The consciousness about language variation is also very important for us. So, now you can see that how the linguistic data can help us not only to revive language, but also to mark the difficulties, the difficulty areas for children, and sensitize the teachers.
I think that is very important, to sensitize the teachers, because at times we have seen when we visited some of the schools that the teachers have very indifferent attitude towards the children. They think that they can't learn the language properly, they are very slow in learning, but they can't actually know what is the exact problem. So, they might think that they are too dull to learn the language or too dull to learn a particular concept, but that is not true. So, that is very important to make the teachers conscious about the differences, and also to make the teachers conscious about the variations, because as we were discussing one day that in some parts the same language can have different lexical items in different parts.
Yes.
So, when the student is using a particular word in his or her home and using the same word in school, the teachers are saying you are saying it wrong, but it is not wrong, it is actually another word for the same thing, same item. So, it is just a case of variation, but then at times we see teachers are not so conscious and they think that it is wrong. So, when we talk about teaching learning methods, materials, as you heard that not only learning methods or learning materials, but teaching materials or making the teachers conscious about the variations and the difficulty points are also quite important.
Yes, yes, yes. And at this point I should also mention that due to this language conflict there are a lot of incidents of dropout. So, there are data from various reports, education reports. For example, the Pratichi India Trust report 2002 mentioned that there are children who are dropping out from schools not for socio-economic reasons, but also for language. So, because they cannot understand what is happening in the class, and when we conduct workshops only with teachers and ask for their feedback and share their experiences, I remember one teacher said that the first day I went to a school, a rural school, I described the entire lesson, I asked what did you understand? The children of standard 3rd said nothing. So, this is the situation. So, it is very important for us to understand that it is a major factor of dropout, and as Bornini also mentioned, so sensitize the teachers is a major plays a major role. So, along with creation of teaching learning materials, there is a need to create teacher training material as well, or teacher training manual. So, this is another job that linguists do. They create materials for saving languages, revitalizing the languages. At times we circulate the materials through formal schools and tell the schools that if you can take one class in 1 week for 30 minutes where children will be taught or some exposure will be given in their own language, that will be helpful. and otherwise there are informal initiatives like the Sunday school, where informal learning or parallel learning takes place, where children get some material in their own language. So, this is very important, and along with that the example that I have shared, I hope you will remember this example. If you are coming from an education or teacher training background who is attending the course, you can think about the importance of both material meant for children and material meant for teachers. These are different, these are complementary, and we can create them after conducting some linguistic analysis.
And what is very important is that when teachers are conscious, they don't think that the children should not use particular terms in the class related to their mother tongue or their native language, or at times what we see, we have actually experienced this, and that is why we are saying, when we were interviewing certain teachers, we saw a very negative attitude towards these school children. They were very young children, like of class 2 or 3, and the teachers felt that they can't learn anything, they don't understand anything, why are you wasting your time with these children? That is what we were told actually. So, because these teachers have a very negative attitude towards those speech community, and that is why that negative attitude is also carried for these young school children. So, when they are made conscious that there are variations in a language, or there are existence of these minor languages which are not less prestigious. So, when these teaching materials are there, and how to deal with that gap, how to fulfill that gap. So, when there are materials being created for the teachers, then that consciousness is also built for the teachers, because it is actually the teachers, they also do not know, they have not received any such materials or guidelines, and that is why they carry that type of concept. So, as a linguist, we also are responsible for creating such materials, where we try to make the teachers also conscious with the teaching materials, so that the gap is fulfilled.
So, at this point I will also talk about the initiatives, various initiatives of MTB-MLE, which is Mother Tongue Based Multilingual Education, which is popular worldwide. So, Mother Tongue Based Multilingual Education talks about incorporating the common language of the children, and also use of the mother tongue of different children or native language of different children in a class. And this is another way of social justice. So, through you already know that we talked about certain policy recommendations of Indian government, where it said clearly that by NCERT there are some language policies 2005, 2020, where it said that children should receive education in their mother tongue, which is basically another way of asserting that the children's own language will be spoken or used in the classroom. It will not be in a difficult situation. So, in MTB-MLE the children's languages are used, and materials are created in different languages, and at times the common language which is used by different children. Now, at this point you can remember the idea of hybrid language that I have already mentioned. So, the use of hybrid languages in classroom. So, there are a huge amount of literature from European context or the context of Canada who are talking about these kind of models, but let me tell you, the situation is very different in countries like India, and along with that I already told you Indonesia and Nigeria, basically several countries of Asia and Africa, where the situation is very different from European countries. So, we have very different kind of multilingualism which is there in India. It is possible for you to find one child who has access to 5-6 different languages and fluency in 5-6 different languages, but it is not promoted in school. So, MTB-MLE can actually help the children to retain their language, to use their languages, and also they can have the feeling that multilingualism is actually a blessing, it is not a curse. So, MTB-MLE programs are actually implemented in different provinces of India, for example, Odisha and Jharkhand, and if you are familiar with these programs, you can know more about them. and certain states who do not have these programs, they are also trying to achieve such models in education. So, Bondini, will you talk about the use of technology for revitalization of certain languages in educational domain?
So, through the data or through these materials which are created, we also can create different type of language technological help. So, these help can be created for both the teachers and the students. The students can get their concept clear or can know about different things in their own native language, and at the same time there are also technological helps or manuals for the teachers. So, maybe one material can be created in the technological domain and that can be used by various teachers. So, that is also there, and some works are being done in that area, though we do not see much works and lots of work needs to be done, but still the initiative has already started. And for the learning material, we see lots of different apps which are not only very informative, which are not only very helpful for learning, but at the same time they are very engaging. So, when the students they use this app, they also feel very entertained. So, teaching or learning does not become boring. So, at times it is there can be some games, they are getting some scores. At the same time they can check their level of learning, what they have learned, how much they need to learn more. And then when they are using technology, the best part of technology is that no one is there to judge them. At times we see the other students can judge them based on their performance, based on their linguistic background, the teachers can judge them, but when someone is using some technological help to learn some concept, then there is no one to judge. So, and again with the technology what we see is that in class a student can ask twice, thrice, but then with the technology one can use it repeatedly unless and until one gets clear about the concept. So, in class one may feel hesitant about asking certain things, but if someone is sitting with some app and looking to it or using that, then one can easily do it twice, thrice, as many times as she wants. So, that also helps. So, there are some benefits for technological aids, technologically created apps for teaching or learning. Same for the teachers as well. Having said that, I also say that in classroom teaching has its own benefit. So, it has a more discussion, it actually helps, creates personal bonding. So, there are of course advantages of classroom learning and teaching, but then the apps or the technological help are also very important. But the sad thing is that we do not see much technologies coming for the minor or endangered languages. There are certain technological apps, pedagogical apps related to major languages that is used widely, and I am sure maybe some of you have also used some of these apps for learning some foreign language or some dominant languages. But we still need to work really hard and we need to work a lot for the minor and endangered languages for creating language technologies for education.
So, you have already learnt about endangered languages, and today you learnt about the revitalization of endangered languages through education, the various platforms of education including classroom, informal classroom and teacher training platforms. So, if you are planning to revitalize a endangered language that is known by you or which is spoken around you, so now you have some tools. So, you can actually adopt the linguistic analysis, you can collect data, conduct analysis, comment on the social linguistic situation, and also try to develop some material which can be used for pedagogic purpose. So, if you are a teacher and attending the course, so please try to pay attention to the fact that along with material for children, we also need material for teacher training, which is very much important for multilingual countries like India. So, we hope that you enjoyed the discussion today, where we tried to create a bridge between endangered language and language teaching. the topics that we have covered, and as we have discussed some of our experiences on working on certain languages. So, it will be also helpful for you, we believe that. So, thank you very much for attending the session.